are in need of those. Pay particular attention to the deadlines of the test and the online clinic. Go ahead and knock those things out. And I'm sure Aaron will talk to you guys about scrimmages and so forth. Be mindful of the dress code during scrimmages, the same as a regular season game. And if you ever need me, let me know. That's it for me, Jim.
All right, very good. All right, Aaron.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to say welcome to the webinar. We're doing these webinars because the membership asked for them. So you guys that are on, I thank you. And if you are listening to us later, you should have been on the call. All right, let's start with our new website. Our new website that everybody should be using is mycvboa.net. You can click on the member button, and that will tell you all your issues about registration. You should be able to go through those step by step and get registered. If you are having trouble after you read that page, send me an email. There are some issues with the Whistle program. I know several of you have called me. I have very little control over the Whistle app. But if you are having a problem, please email me your problem. And I will make sure that VHSL knows how much trouble we're having. This Whistle is their project, their idea, and sometimes I just don't think they realize some of the confusion they cause when they do things like this. So again, if you're having trouble with the Whistle program, which is the program that VHSL selected for you to register and take your test, please send me an email and I will try to help you. With that being said, the free testing period, when I say free, that means you can do this test up till November the 15th at 11:59, and they do not charge you. If you go in at 11:50 and try to do that test, I am almost positive you will have an issue. So please knock these items out as early as possible. If you wait to the last minute, you almost guaranteed to have an issue. And the biggest issue that VHSL does is they charge you for being silly. So don't waste your money. Get this stuff done for free. I am still assigning scrimmages. So we have not finished. So just hold tight. I know some of you haven't seen one yet, but I am taking my time to do it because I'm tired of people calling me talking about they had it blocked out. So pretty much every day when I send them out, I am checking the blocks and printing off the blocks because again, I'm tired of people calling me and said they had it blocked when in reality they did not. So scrimmages are still coming, and we should get through that in the next couple of days. Your blocks, as of this date, as of today, you should be blocking out through December, because once we finish with scrimmages, we go live, and it's no stopping after that. The season is here, so block out as much as you can, as far ahead as you can. In my mind, you should have December blocked out. I have had a couple of questions about IABO. We are a IABO board. You have to join IABO separate from us. If you are interested in IABO, give me a call or shoot me an email, and I will make sure you get the right registration and I will make sure you get registered. All right. Again, I'm looking forward to a great season. If you have if you're having issues at scrimmages, which means if someone doesn't show up, or you're showing up wearing the wrong stuff, the responsibility for reporting that is the R's. The game report should state who was there. If we had a uniform infraction, all those items need to be in your game report. All right, that's it for me. Shoot me emails and I will answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. So now we're going to turn it back over to Mr. Stone, our interpreter, to hit some key rules entering the season. Here are some of the things that he's going to quickly walk through. And with that, Jerry, have at it.
Thank you, Jim, Aaron, and Norman. First of all, let me go through some thank yous here before I start. Thank yous go out, certainly, as Norman said, to everybody that's on and Aaron also said, it's on the call. The membership has asked for this, and hopefully a majority of the people will participate rather than just listen to it during the week. Secondly, certainly want to wish everybody a great Thanksgiving holiday. It's right around the corner. I'm sure you and your family have a lot to be thankful for. We all do. Third, and probably the most important thing, is if any of our ladies or gentlemen that are in the group are veterans, want to thank you on this day. It's yours, and we live in a great country, and it's due to you and the people that served before you, giving us the ability to be free in what we do. So thanks so much for your service. And last but not least, I want to thank Jim Neal. The template that you see on your computer tonight and all the information that we are able to gather during these conference calls is due to Jim, and puts a lot of work into it. And so thanks a lot, Jim. I paraphrased before I get started here tonight, a saying that says proper preparation increases our ability to perform at a higher level, and nothing is more true than when we prepare to referee in basketball season. And a lot of what I'm going to review tonight is repetitive of what I've potentially said in the past, or what our commissioner has tried to reiterate over the last couple of meetings. So to start off with, the first thing I'm going to talk about is officials in their pregame duties. It's on page 16, Rule 2. And rather than just go over the duties, which you can certainly read in the rule book, I'm going to talk about a template that we can potentially use before our games. It's going to set us up for success. And I say that because several of the games that I've observed, and after talking to different people, it's bizarre how many times that you see our crews come out on the floor to officiate at the 7, 6, 5, even 4-minute mark before tip-off, when in fact there's a template in the book that says we're supposed to be out there at least 15 minutes. As a group, we've said we'd like to have people on the floor when we've got players on the floor. As you know, today's players can create havoc on their own, and we just can't be coming out of the locker room and chaos be going on. So we really need to go and be out on the floor. And there's a way to do that, and I've written down some things and some suggestions that we'll put up on the website. One is don't wait until the fourth period to get the crew, whether it's a varsity foul in a varsity game, a varsity foul in a JV game foul in a ninth grade game. Really doesn't matter. When halftime comes and the crew comes back on the floor in the game in front of you, that's a good time to go back. Certainly no later than halfway through the third period. It's almost impossible, after doing this for certainly as long as I have, to understand how a crew can get dressed, have a proper pregame, and do it in about 15 minutes. That's cheating the crew. It's cheating the kids on the floor in your game, and certainly not preparing the crew for to perform at a great level. So my suggestion is when the crew comes out for halftime in the game in front of you, sometime during that third period, don't wait till the fourth period, get in the locker room. When we come out, we know what the rule says. We're due on the floor 15 minutes before tip-off. There are times when the whole crew isn't there. That doesn't mean that we should sit back in the locker room and come out with 3 minutes to go because we're waiting for one person to get dressed. We can't have players on the floor performing warm-up duties. We can't be checking equipment. We can't be doing a good job of a captain's meeting. We can't be certainly checking the book at the 10-minute mark if we, as a crew, walk on the floor with 3, 4, 5 minutes to go. So somebody's got to come out there, 1, 2 people, but we've got to cover our butts by getting out on the floor and taking care of business. And that's got to happen certainly before the 10-minute mark. When you get on the floor, if it's a 2-person crew, we know everybody's responsible for one team. If it's a 3-person crew, you've got the U1 and the U2 that are responsible for teams. But whatever the case, count your players, find out who your captain is, and certainly find out if your team, in fact, is going to go back in the locker room. And get that information to the referee as soon as possible. And I want to follow up on what Aaron said. We need to put more responsibility on our referees. Everybody becomes a referee at some point during the season. So when you say referee, that doesn't mean that that individual is the boss. But if you assign that position, certainly certain responsibilities come with it that aren't with the other positions in the crew. And you need to take pride in getting those responsibilities covered. So get that information to the referee, and then referee, you should have a plan with your crew as to what time you're going to get the captains together, and that should be, if possible, before they go back in the locker room, so that once the teams come back on the floor, they can go to work and won't worry about the crew interrupting them. 2, obviously, sometime before the 10-minute mark, the referee needs to go over and check the book, make sure the table is set with any information you need to convey to the timer or the announcer, get it done then, so that when you do come back at the 10-minute mark, you're ready to check the books and your scorekeepers are there. Last year, I remember specifically, we had somebody spreading a rumor you only needed to check one book. That is a total fallacy. None of us that have been in this board since I was here, that were trained by CVBOA, have ever been trained to check one book. We have to put the books side by side. We get information from both books at certain times. We've talked about this in the past, and so make sure that both books agree with one another. Do not just check one book. Go back across, you wait for the clock to run down. About the 2-minute mark is a good time to go shake hands with the coaches. That way you can get to them before they get in their pregame huddle. Nothing's worse than having 2 or 3 officials come into a huddle and try to shake a coach's hand or don't get to shake the coach's hand. So, again, that's a template. Every referee has got their own little stick nuance that they do in their pre-games. But the closer that we can stick as a board to doing the same thing at the same time, when we have total control over it, the better off we're going to be in educating the teams, the tables, and the coaches as to what we expect to happen. So, as you go through the season, let's try to do that. Let's try to make sure everybody covers that at about the same time and make sure that we don't fall short on that, because certainly I think we all can agree if we're disorganized before we throw that ball up, we're going to be disorganized after we throw it up. And we don't want to do that. So disorganization leads to failure. All right, the second rule I want to cover, because there were some questions on some tests about it, and I'm not going to go in depth in it. Page 18, correctable error. I think I'm correct on that, Jimmy. No, I am not correct on that. Give me 1 second. Yeah. 210, the correctable error. That's exactly right. I'm so sorry. We went over this in the last meeting. I'm going to be very brief on it. Remember, 80% of your correctable errors involve free throws. That's a pretty simple system to remember. Not shooting enough, shooting too many, the wrong person shooting at the right end or the right person shooting at the wrong end, and the 5th one is scoring. I said in the last meeting, if you remember back in the day, we had time and in that time, and it's no longer a correctable error. It is correctable, but not under the correctable error rule. So, all we need to remember is those 5 things are correctable. And if you look on the chart in Rule 2, you will see that no matter whether the clock is running when the error is committed or whether the clock is stopped when the error is committed, The only thing we need to remember is the error correctable? And I'm going to go over the questions you asked one more time in a second. But is that error correctable, and have we had a starting of the clock? If the clock is running and the error is committed, and that would be probably a scoring error, then we can't have a dead ball and then another live ball. So if the clock's running and the ball goes through the basket, it's dead. Once the offensive player steps out of bounds and turns around, it's live, and if we have committed a scoring error, it's too late to correct it. If the clock is stopped, we don't worry about how many live ball, dead balls, like during a free throw we have. All we worry about is when does the clock start? And then have we had a dead ball? At that point, if you look at the chart, that is the point where we have to have corrected the error. If we have a live ball after that first dead ball, it's too late. So if we organize our thought pattern and we ask those questions to ourselves, one, is that error correctable? If the answer is yes, then we continue. If the answer is no, we stop. If we continue, we ask ourselves, the crew, had the clock started? If the answer is no, we know we're in good shape. If the answer is yes, then we have to ask ourselves, the crew, have we had a second live ball? If the answer is yes, the answer is we've gone too far. If the answer is no, we know we can correct it, and we ask the last question, have we had a change of possession? If that answer is no, and all of this is on the website in material that we've put up before, if that answer is no, then we go right back to where the error was. We cancel any common fouls, intentional fouls, flagrant fouls, technical fouls, all that count. Any score or time that's gone off the clock or happened stays. But we go back to where it was. We simply correct the error and we play off whatever happens. If we've had a change of possession, we stop the game, we correct the error. Then we go back to where we were when we stopped the game, which means if we should have shot more free throws, as an example, but we didn't. We should have shot two. We shot 1 and 1. We missed the first one and we played. The other team goes down and they take a shot, and the rebound is acquired by the team that was shooting free throws at the other end. We're coming up the floor. We discover the error. We haven't had a dead ball. The clock has started. We can correct the error, but because we've had a change of possession, we're going to shoot the second free throw, and then we're giving that ball back to the same team. It's going to be hard for a coach to understand that, but easy for you to explain it if you understand the rule. Remember also the two things that aren't correctable by rule, but are correctable in reality. One, that's timing. If we have obvious knowledge, and we have said in this board for several years now, somebody in the crew almost inevitably has a count. Whoever's got that count makes it easy to correct a timing error. If the clock didn't start or ran too far, that person should know how much time we need to take off or put on the clock. But if we don't have obvious knowledge, then we can't correct a timing error. The second one that doesn't fall under the correctable error is the possession error award. Remember, there is a way to make that right. We'd like to think we never award the team under the possession error, the wrong team, the ball, but we do. That happens. Just remember, if we discover we have awarded the wrong team the ball and the throw-in is ended legally, it's too late to do anything about it, except we never award the same team the ball twice in a row. So we need to flip that arrow if we've given it to the wrong team. Pretty simple process. Stuff happens. Again, we'd like to think that we would catch that before the ball was thrown in, but sometimes we don't do that. So it is what it is. Okay. The next rule would be on page 25, Rule 3. I'm going to do these really briefly. The team equipment and apparel. Just remember, before the game starts, we need to check anything that's wrapped. And if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So get whatever players have anything wrapped to the referee, and the referee is going to make a call on that as a safety factor. Cover your rear ends. And remember, in high school, we can't have anything hard or cast below the elbow. We said that in our last meetings. Okay? Also on Rule 3.5, 3, and 4, on page 26, there are a couple of questions involving sleeves and headbands, and we again are the uniform police. Just remember that it's two separate categories. T-shirts have to be a similar color to the color of the torso of the jersey. So using John Marshall as an example, if they're at home and they have their white jersey, it's got to be a white T-shirt. I think their away colors are blue. So if they are on the road and they have their blue uniforms, it has to be a blue T-shirt. It has to match the similar color of the jersey, the torso of the jersey. The rest of the stuff that's worn, all the players have to be wearing the same thing. And I know we still have problems with anybody who's wearing a bandana. Just remember, bandanas cannot have extensions. I would not allow the players to tuck them in. I would have to cut it off because when you tuck it in, it comes out, and then you're chasing down people the whole game. The rule says you can't have extensions, so it covers you, but you do what you've got to do. We just can't have the extended bandana hanging down in the back of the player's head, unlike most headbands. Okay? The next rule that we've got some questions on involve the setting of the arrow, and you can see there's a format that I'm following. I've had a lot of people call me and give me their questions, and I don't think it's my job to answer your tests for you. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I, like you, have to take the test, and I have to get my rule book, and I have to study it. And it's obvious when some people call me about some of their test questions that they aren't looking at the rule book, because the test questions are verbatim, right out of the book. So the folks that do send their tests to me or their questions and reference rules, I can appreciate the fact that you're looking for the rule and you just can't get it right. And those are the people, I'm willing to do anything for you. But for those of you that just call me and giving me questions, we all take the test and we all have to pass it. It doesn't do you any good if I pass your test. So on page 28, setting the possession error, just remember it's set off the very first possession of the game. We've talked about this many times. We don't care how that possession occurs. It can occur off the tip. It can certainly occur off of a violation. It may even occur off a foul or even a technical foul. It doesn't really matter how that initial possession occurs. When we award the initial possession to a team, then their opponent gets the arrow. It's important that as a crew, we check that once we've got the ball in play. We don't have to stop the game right away, but at the first opportunity, which is normally the first dead ball, then we need to go over, correct the arrow, make sure the arrow is right, and we need to explain to the two coaches what we're doing. And the referee needs to be in on that discussion because the referee is responsible for the game. The next rule that there were a couple of questions about was Rule 411, page 30. If you've got your rule book with you, continuous motion. There are a couple of things in your system, and you know that I like the term systematize. This is the way I was trained, and I'm just passing it on for those of you who like that word. Remember, continuous motion only applies on a defensive foul. It does not occur when the offense fouls. Okay? If a foul occurs on the offense, the ball is dead immediately. Okay? And it can only count if the ball was released prior to the foul occurring. But on continuous motion, once the try is started, foot and arm movement, the offensive player is allowed to continue that try and to finish it. If we have continuous motion and we have a foul off the ball, and we've emphasized this for several years now, that's a multi-official call. And it looks good when two officials get together and make the decision as to whether the ball was in flight when somebody's off the ball foul occurred. But it's nearly impossible for the official who's calling contact on the shooter to tell if there's a foul over in the corner some 20, 25 feet away from the ball. Just doesn't happen, and we guess at that way too much. So get together and make that decision. But remember, we only apply it to when the defense fouls, not the offense. Next rule that we've had some questions about, that there were several questions about, the disqualified player. We know we've harped on this, page 31. Remember, the sequence is once the player or you, as an official or formed a player, has been disqualified, inform the head coach first. Then start the 15-second clock, and there's a horn at 5 seconds, so that just like on the short, the 30-second timeout and the 60-second, we have a 15-second horn. Well, we've got the horn that occurs at the 5-second mark, so we've got 10 seconds to go before the substitute has to be in. Inform them to start the clock, and then inform the player that he or she is disqualified. If, in fact, the coach doesn't get the player up there within 15 seconds or close, remember that is a direct technical foul on the head coach. That's one of those fouls that the head coach is responsible for, and they need to do it, unlike the extra timeout. And also, remember, we've kind of got a policy within our group that we try to rotate the calling official away from the table, so that if we do have anything that happens out of the ordinary, that there's a new official at the table. Aaron won't get that call that says Jim Neal threw a coach out of the game with 2 technical fouls. Jim may have gotten one, but Haywood Bostic is going to get the second one. We shouldn't be in a position where one person's there, and especially the person who is maybe called a foul that's disqualified a player. Next rule, page 36, 425, a held ball. Just some hints, but there was a question on the test that referred to this that I can remember. Remember, first of all, players and coaches request timeouts, but officials grant timeouts. So, one, if you're the off official and there's a timeout requested, find the ball and see if it's in possession of a player. You can tell that coach, look, I heard your request, but I've got to find the basketball. I can't be blowing my whistle if I don't know if the ball's in possession of a player. So we've got to make sure of that. If you're the near official, we'd like for you to control the timeout situation, but sometimes you can't hear it. There's chaos. You've got your mind other places. So we understand how the off official can grant a timeout. But what we don't want to happen is the off official grant a timeout so quickly that the official who has the ball can't say specifically that the ball is in possession of one team or the other. And last but not least, when it comes to held balls, it's right in the rule book. There was a question on the test, and it's a great point to make for all of us. We can't have one player bump, push, or jump on or dive on to other players trying to get part of the ball to have a held ball call. If somebody's bumping somebody out of the way, if somebody's pushing somebody out of the way, if there's somebody diving on top of a player on the floor who has the ball, we have to call fouls. Prevents rough play, and in fact, it is a foul by rule. So, don't hesitate to blow your whistle when that happens. One, we're allowing a person to get an advantage over another one. Somebody's laying on the floor with a ball, and somebody dives on top of them, and we call held ball. If there's a foul, then we've let a team gain an advantage, and one possession can win or lose a game. Okay, just remember that. So, Jim, I think at this point we got a poll question, if I'm not incorrect.
Yep. So here's the first poll question. I'm going to launch it. I'm only going to leave it up for probably 30 seconds or so. And for those, not anybody who's on the webinar tonight, but if you are watching the video, you will not be able to click on the. Okay. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds. And done. And I'm going to share the results. So I'm assuming Mr. Stone may want to cover that.
Well, I think we already have covered it when we said it's the referee. I'm assuming. I don't have the poll in front of me, but
Yep.
I think that's what you had asked. The referee is the one individual that rules on things not covered in the rule book, especially when they involve safety. So
yeah. So we had a few people who said any game official and 10% who said game management.
Right.
Not sure about that. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Jim. Moving on page 38, Rule 436, point of interruption. Just remember, there's a lot of information in that rule that we all need to read, and I'm not going to review it all. But remember, there's three things. First, after any double fouls, double technical fouls, simultaneous fouls, or in the case of an inadvertent whistle, that's when you use the point of interruption rule, which means we go back to where it was. Just remember, if we have an inadvertent whistle, though, and it's on, if there's team control, and we blow the whistle, and this is one I remember vividly from several years ago that caused chaos in a JV game. But we had a ball that was going out of bounds, and the coach jumped up and hollers timeout. The official erroneously grants the timeout. That happens sometime, especially in JV games. We all learn to get better, so I'm not saying the officials did a bad job, but I think they learned a lot when this happened. They now kill the ball while it's in flight, and now we've got to figure out what the heck to do. And remember, if we blow that inadvertent whistle, we have to go back to the last team in control, which means that now we're going to have to explain to that coach why the ball was going to go out of bounds, but we're giving it back to the team that last touched it. It just is what it is. It is the rule. The other side of that is, though, remember, if there's a shot and you inadvertently have a whistle, then whatever happens on that shot is whatever happens. One, if it goes in, we count the basket. And then if A scores, then we're going to give the ball to B, and B can run the line, and we play as if nothing happened. If the ball misses at the point that it ceases to have the opportunity to go in, then we go to the arrow, because the point of interruption would have been on a try with no possession. And we've got to determine who gets the ball, so we'd use the arrow. Again, discipline, discipline, discipline. Before you blow the whistle, find the ball and think about that. But there's a rule in the book that covers us. And if we have an inadvertent whistle and we have to go to the point of interruption, just like on double fouls or double technicals, anytime we use the word double, then go to the rule. Nobody can complain. They can complain about what we did, but they can't complain about the enforcement of the rule. Okay? The next rule is Rule 9.4, kicking. Remember, several years ago, this changed. Normally, it's a defensive act. It has to be any part of the leg can now not be used to kick the ball. But if the offense throws the ball off of somebody's leg and it's not an intentional kick, it's not a violation. And we see that happen. Not a lot, but there are times when we are blowing the whistle simply because the ball strikes somebody's leg. There are times when it's not an intentional act, and if it's not intentional, then it's not a violation. The rule clarification in 99, Rule 99, page 59 of backcourt, we reviewed in the first meeting. I'm not going to take a lot of time on that, but again, just to clarify that for those who might be a little confused, and it is confusing the way it's written. It simply says that if a player is already located in the backcourt and the ball is deflected into backcourt by a defender, that any player can recover that ball. So you've got to be in backcourt, and it's got to be deflected by the defense. Now, other than that, the rule involving backcourt has not changed a bit. And again, if you have a system, you'll remember these things. One, we can't have backcourt on a throw-in. Can't happen. Two, we can't have backcourt until we get possession in bounds. Three, the offense can't be the last to touch the ball in front court and the first to touch the ball in backcourt. If they do, it's a violation. So if we've got possession in bounds and the offense, no matter how they touch it, the defender may knock the ball out of the offensive player's hands. I remember this play a long, long time ago, close to the division line. The defender smacks the ball out of the offensive player's hands, hits the offensive player's foot, goes backcourt. Offensive player goes back and recovers it. We have a whistle, backcourt. Coach goes crazy. And I just happened to be watching the game that happened in. And it's hard to explain to the coach that even though the defender hit the ball, the last person to touch the ball was the foot of the offensive player. Therefore, the offense caused it to go backcourt. If first touched in backcourt by the offense, we have a violation. The biggest thing we do is we don't miss that call, but there's some crazy places we put the ball in play. For some reason, we keep forgetting that we don't have backcourt violations in the old front court. We have it in the new front court. So if we have a backcourt violation, the ball belongs in what would be the new front court. And it should be at the spot closest to where the ball was touched, because that's where we put throw-ins, at the spot closest to the foul or to the violation. We don't always bring it back to the division line. And there are officials that are continually doing that, and it's a wrong application of the mechanic of the throw-in. So just remember, the three elements you need to remember are: have we had possession in bounds? Who touched it last if it was the offense? Who touched it first if it was the defense? We've got a violation. Jim, is this time for another poll question?
Yep, and we're going to do it quick.
All right.
And I'm going to leave it up for about 30 seconds, and is it a violation to strike the ball with the fist? Yes, no, or depends on the severity of the fist striking. And I'm going to give it another 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it out and share the results. So we got almost a 50-50 on yes versus no.
Well, I think if they go to 9-4, they're going to see that kicking or hitting the ball with the fist is an illegal act.
Yep.
So for those people that think you can hit the ball with your fist or strike it with your fist, that is an illegal act. You can't do that. And again, that's one more important point about reading the rules. We just can't miss questions like that. All right, on to Rule 10, fouls and penalties, page 61. This is a huge rule. There's a lot of information in it. Just make sure that you read the differences. You could study an hour on this rule. The differences between an administrative technical foul, a team technical foul, a substitute technical foul, a player technical foul, a bench technical foul, and a head coach technical foul. And there are a plethora of reasons why some affect the head coach and some don't. And as I said, we could spend an hour on that, so I'm not going to test your intelligence by going over all that, but I will challenge you to read that rule at least once, if not twice, just to get it in your head. Remember, though, there are some important things about that rule that are easy to remember. One, all fouls go towards a team's total, whether it's an administrative foul, and I know you guys that do college, I'm not sure what the rule is. I'm not going to speak on it, but I think there are some rules that don't go towards team fouls in college, and some do. Again, I've said, back in the day, there weren't but one or two rules differences. Now there's probably 20. I don't know how you guys do it, but in high school, all fouls go towards the team's total. However, there are only certain exceptions that go towards the head coach, whether it's direct or indirect. And I almost hesitate to call them out because I know I'm going to forget one or two, but I'll try to give you an example. For an example, a head coach is going to be charged with a technical foul directly if he or she acts in an unsportsmanlike way. That's their responsibility. Two, if an illegal player is in the game, that's directly charged to the head coach because they're responsible for their players. Three, if a player enters a game with an illegal uniform and it's discovered before the ball's live, the coach is going to get a direct technical. They're responsible because before the game we asked, is all of your equipment and your uniforms legal? So that's a coach's responsibility. For not replacing a disqualified player is the responsibility of the coach, and that's a direct technical foul. And it's important because we maybe want to charge an extra time out to a head coach, but even though the head coach may call it as a team technical foul. So know those direct technicals because that's going to really affect how a coach coaches. They lose the right to the coach's box privilege if they get that, versus an indirect technical foul, which can come from any bench personnel's actions, which means in between periods before the game, as well as during the game, any non-player. Players who may leave the bench area during a fight but may not participate. Remember, that's only one indirect technical foul, even though there may be multiple players that leave the bench area. Versus if multiple players leave the bench area and participate, then we have an indirect technical foul charged to the head coach for each participant. And that's when we start trying to figure out how many for each team so that we know that if we've got an even number, then we've got double fouls and we don't shoot. We go back to the point of interruption versus if we have uneven numbers, then we have to shoot free throws and then somebody's going to get the ball. But just make sure that you understand and read that rule thoroughly because it can cause some confusion. And at the point in time when this rule is going to come into effect for all of us, and there's absolutely nobody that's refereeing that can say that it doesn't, that's when there's a high stress level. There's a lot going on. The crew's got to be tunnel focused. And we need to know how we're going to apply the technical foul rule because we can't be erroneously giving people technical fouls that they shouldn't be getting, especially head coaches. And I've done it, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's ever done it. It just stuff happens, but we need to know that rule in depthly. Just remember, though, if we sit the coach down and they lose their coach's box privilege, the coach can still stand. And I've heard numerous officials tell coaches, look, you've lost your coach's box privilege. You can no longer stand. That is not a correct statement. If you read Rule 10, the coach can still stand to put a sub in. They can go to the table. They can clap for spontaneous for an excellent play. As I said, they can get up to put a sub in. So there are things that the coach can stand for. They just can't stand and coach. So don't go over and tell a coach, look, you can't stand. That's an erroneous statement. They can stand. They just can't stand and coach. So just remember that, and please read the first of that rule numerous times. Points of emphasis. There are a couple things I want to cover before I close here that the NFSH and the Virginia High School League have covered in the clinic. Number one in points of emphasis is the concussion rule. None of us want a player to play while they're under the effects of a concussion, but it specifically says in the rule book, and I want to emphasize that we are not doctors. We're not there in the role of a doctor. I know that we have EMTs, police officers. We got doctors, but we aren't there in that role. And we turn the player over to the head coach and the certified athletic trainer or the certified adult person who is going to put the player back on the floor. If the player then shows signs of not being altogether there, as a crew, you certainly have the right to go and as a referee to the head coach and say, look, I think we've got some problems here and they need to be addressed. But initially, we're not the doctor. Don't play the role of a doctor. We just don't need to go there. Secondly, the uniform and apparel rule. We've been challenged with this. There's even been interpretations, unfortunately, that have come down from the Virginia High School League that have caused us some discomfort on what players can do with their uniforms. But clearly in the rule book, it says that there's a way to wear the uniform. There are specific things that can be worn. There are specific things that can't be worn. I wrote down in my notes, enforce often and enforce early, especially during the early part of the season and scrimmages. These players cannot be allowed to do things in scrimmages that we are not going to allow them to do in games. There is no such thing as the term, well, this is just a scrimmage. We have to wear our uniforms. We have to wear our shoes, our black socks, our whistles. We have to wear our jackets. We've got a dress code. They turn the game over to us to officiate. And when we officiate it, we don't change the travel rule because it's a scrimmage. We don't change continuous motion because it's a scrimmage, and we certainly shouldn't change the uniform rule because it's a scrimmage. So the only exception I would offer is for our JV and ninth grade officials certainly take under consideration that the uniforms at some point are handed down from the varsity, and some of the schools do not have the greatest budget in the world, and you're probably going to find that you have to make some concessions. So a few. You're certainly not going to let them make a travesty of the rule, but I'm not going to say that you're not going to have to make some concessions at the lower levels with uniforms, especially when you got a youngster that's 5 foot tall and only weighs about 80 pounds, and they're wearing extra large shorts. So we don't want them to become indecent. So we need to allow them to kind of do their thing for a while. Another point of emphasis this year is traveling. We just finished the class the other night and listened to some of the comments and watching some of the folks referee. Just remember there's 3 things you can do with the basketball. You can pass it, you can shoot it, you can dribble it. If you're shooting it or if you're passing it, you can lift that pivot foot, but you can't put it back down before you release the ball. There's no such things as 2 steps in high school. I don't know where a 2-step rule came from. Back when I was in school, there was a dance, and that shows you how far back that was. So, but nevertheless, if you're shooting the ball or passing the ball, and you lift that pivot foot up, you've got to get rid of that basketball before you put your pivot foot back down. If you're dribbling it, however, remember that the ball's got to be out of your hand, the player's hands, before you lift that pivot foot. If we don't identify the pivot foot when the offensive player receives the pass, then it's extremely difficult for us to call traveling because it's not a play we can guess on. And you've heard me say multiple times, and I mean it sincerely, it's better to miss something that's there than call something that isn't. So I certainly am not diminishing the importance of finding the pivot foot. That's the first thing we need to do. Find a pivot foot, then find a defender. But you need to know where the pivot foot is if, in fact, you're going to call traveling. Remember a jump stop? A player who lands on one foot, jumps and lands then on both feet, has no pivot foot. They can jump to shoot, they can jump to pass. But if they pivot after that, jump off of one foot, land on two simultaneously, then that's a travel. You can read the rest of the points of emphasis on your own. That is an important part of the book, and there's a couple of test questions that come from the point of emphasis. I'm here for you. I've had a lot of people call and ask me, again, specific questions. Again, I would appreciate it when you call. If you researched the test question, to at least show me that you've been in the book. And once you've done that, I don't think that I've turned anybody away on giving them the proper information that they need to know, both what the answer to the test question is, as well as they can find it in the book. It's been some good information here tonight. Hopefully you've gleaned something from it. Jim, again, I want to thank you for your hard work. Couldn't do this without you, bud. And again, I want to wish everybody a blessed holiday season, and we'll see you sometime in December. Jim, I'm through.
All right, we're going to do one quick poll question, and we're probably about 2 minutes from wrapping up. I'm going to put this one out here. Take a look. I'm going to leave it up for 30 seconds. Norman is going to jump on. I'm going to unmute him, and he's going to jump on in a second. Close us out, and we're going to be good.
All right, can you hear me, Jim?
Closing the poll. I'm not going to share it. Everybody got it right. Nice work. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me, Jim?
Yep.
All right, real quick, and then we'll close this out. Thank you, Mr. Stone, and thanks, Jim. You did a great job. I think everybody likes the web meetings. It's hard to believe this is the third meeting of the season so far. I have 10 quick things. If you have a question about them, email me, text me, call me. I'm going to go through them real quick so we can wrap this up in the hour we promised. Remember, next meeting in person, December 9, December the 9th. We have an in-person meeting, 6 o'clock. Also, there was a question about wearing uniform, coming dressed to your scrimmages. Yes, you can go dressed to your scrimmage games and be directed by the commissioner. Look out for text messages from Cliff and from the arbiter on meeting after the games. Cliff will send text messages. We'll meet, for example, at some restaurant or some after the game. So look out for those text messages. Insurance, it's on our website. If you are looking at have an injury or something like that, look at the insurance policies on our sites. December the 9th, we'll be nominating for our executive board memberships. Remember, all those ones from president all the way down to 4 at-large positions are open. December 9, we'll start the nominating process. Send all of those to Zach, or by email or by texting him. Then in February, on the 10th, the meeting, in-person meeting, we'll be going over those speeches. So December 9 starts the nominating process. Remember, officials in the locker room. Aaron told you the last 2 years, if you are not a part of the crew, do not go in someone else's locker room giving them instructions. That's an R in there for that purpose, and that's all I'll say about that. Do not go into the stands. Remember, we talked about that at our first meeting. We got to be professional, and that's always been looked at. The R gets the travel. The R gets the travel fee. If there's some issue, you can give Aaron a text or an email, but remember the R, work that out with your crew. Pink whistles, the executive board has taken care of that, so we'll work on that and try to get folks pink whistles. And last thing, is I split members at large with different alphabetized names. So from A to Z, certain at-large members have a certain portion, and that's basically just to call and seek information, or if you have an issue, they'll be reaching out to you. That's all I have, Jim, and everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks, everybody.